everyone. It's Jenn Drummond. Welcome back to another episode of Seek Your Summit. Today, I have a guest named Tino Dietrich. I'm not saying it properly in the German way, but that's the best my little American accent can do. So thanks for sticking with me. He is a relationship expert and the CEO of the Dietrich Institute, and we are going to learn some things today. So Tino, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Hi.
Hi. Okay, you've lived all over the world and have a lot of these international experiences. How have they played a role in relationships and success in your life?
I mean, it's manifold, right? People tend to go relationship from person to person, but you have a relationship to money, you have a relationship to culture, you have a relationship to countries, to your home country. I mean, I'm from Germany. I've lived in many different countries. So I had to adapt. I was a guest in many countries, and I always appreciated being treated well and nice and welcomed with open arms. So relationships are important because if they are not good, obviously you have a bad time. So that's the foundation. Wherever you go, wherever you start, with whatever you do.
Yes, and that relationship with yourself is probably a great place to start so you can have relationships with others.
That's where I usually start with people is because they tend to overlook that. And to me, it's mind-boggling to see some people talk to themselves the way they would never allow anybody else to talk to them. So, you allow yourself to talk to yourself in a way that you probably would be very offended, the least to say, was somebody else would talk to you like that.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like I realized when I started climbing mountains, like this is hard enough. I am not allowed to pile on that hardness by being mean to myself. And so I had this little mantra where it was being kind to myself makes me stronger. And I'd be like, being kind to myself makes me stronger. And I'd repeat that like multiple times because you would step funny or you would get nervous or like these different things that are human experiences.
Yeah.
And I would have to be kind to myself through those experiences so that I could continue climbing the mountain because the mountain was hard enough.
Yeah, I see it in life. I mean, I'm an avid golfer. Not that playing golf is anywhere close to as difficult as climbing mountains.
Depends on the
mountain. It depends on the mountain and where you play. So, but in golf, it is amazing how people react, right? And there's a saying, the most important distance in golf is the one between your left and your right ear.
Yeah. Okay, so there's this thing called work-life balance, but you argue it's a lie. What should high achievers be aiming for instead?
We're taught so many things, right? People tell us, hey, you got to do this in order to get there. You got to work hard in order to make money, So it's all these beliefs that we're taught. And it's the way you've been brought up that shapes your point of view to a lot of things. So then you are stuck in this balance work life. However, if you're not clear about what work for you should be and what life should be, it's very difficult to get that balanced, right? If you don't have the right scale for yourself, because if you're chasing something that you really don't want, but everybody tells you that it is what you should chase, then you will never get there. So whoever tells you, hey, you got to do this balance of work life, how do they know? How do they know? And do you actually know? And a lot of people said, what are you asking me? Of course I know what I want. Do you? Do you really? And I know because obviously I read about you and, what happened to you and you came to that aha moment in life. And, I don't think it always needs to be that harsh, right? But, and that's where I said, I went through a very similar situation and I came to the conclusion that I said, I'm going out there, tell people like, hey, you don't have to end up where I ended up before you come to that aha moment, that revelation, that epiphany, that life is a precious gift and you should make the best out of it every second, right? Embrace it. It's not that life is not happening to you, it's happening for you, right? And you turn things around and then you start to understand work and life. And that should really be one, it shouldn't be two things.
Yeah, I like that. Not one. There should be one and not two things. And, when I was setting big goals, it was this thing of, okay, I'm going to climb Mount Everest. Well, how does that look in my schedule? Climbing Mount Everest is a lifestyle. It's not just a goal. It's like, I'm going to
Mm,
change my eating habits. I'm going to change my
mm.
exercise habits. I'm going to change what I do with my free time. Instead of going to lunch with my girlfriends had to meet me for hikes because that's how I could get it all in. And so it was just, it's like these goals that we set, or these like careers that we chase, they're a lifestyle. They're not a, aha, I arrived here and now I'm good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's an ongoing journey, right?
You talk about, we both had near-death experiences. And when you have these near-death experiences, it really puts purpose into focus. And it allows us to be like, okay, this life isn't forever. How do I make the most of this? And how do I like live life in this state of gratitude? For somebody that doesn't have to, like, what advice do you give to people to check in with so that they don't have that near death experience? Like, I think I had cues along the way that I was just ignoring, so that the universe finally was like, okay, fine, girl, we're going to give you a car crash so that you can like check out of yourself and reconnect to what's important. What are some of those cues for others so they don't have our experience?
So it's interesting what you're saying, because I met a few people who were in a similar situation. And when you talk to them, they all say pretty much the same thing that you just said. There was an experiment many, many years ago I read about. Someone heard about the alteration of senses when you lose eyesight, right? And you hear better, or you smell better, or whatever. And so he artificially had someone blind himself. It was an experiment, but it failed. And it failed because the person that went through it knew that after 6 months, 5 months, when the experiment is over, I will be able to see again. So he never developed those senses. And I think when you say that in terms of, hey, it's almost like telling a kid, like, don't do that, right? And then people said, like, well, children have to run through their own thing, and have to make their own experiences and when you go out there and you say, hey, I had this near-death experience, and this is what happened to me, and this is how it changed me. People always will probably say, oh, well, that's horrible, that's terrible. Whoa. But they never will understand what you went through in that moment, or that, and it's not a moment in terms of a second, it's a moment in life. And then you look back, you're almost on the other side, and you look back and you say, how was my life before, and how has my life changed after? And I had the same thing. And I mean, I became so humble. I became so small, when you sit there and you think it's over, right? You become so like, how stupid was I, to say, I'm going to call that individual next week, or, you have that situation with your father that you want to address, and you push it out. Who says you can call him next week, right? And I think all one can do is you can try and explain that to the best of your abilities, and be as vivid as possible, as candid as possible, probably with the people who are close to you, like your children, your family. And that's the best we can do. We can go out there and say the same thing. I mean, you're literally saying the same thing that I'm saying, because we go out there and say, people, wake up. This is a freaking precious gift you have here. Don't, it up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know, like, after my accident, for a few months, everything was magical. Everything, right? Like the rock that was in a weird spot on the cement. You're like, how did you get here? How cool is it that you're here? Like, just silly things that your brain would run to. And then life started getting normal again, I guess is how I'd say it. And so for me, I've had to interrupt myself during the day and just say, check in. Jenn, are you doing autopilot? Are you doing what you want? Is this the kind of energy you want to bring to this activity? Like, because we're just these habitual creatures. And until you can learn how to interrupt the pattern and then get curious about it, I think it's hard to change.
It's interesting because during COVID, early on, I was interviewed, and people say, oh, how do relationships now change, COVID in here? And how do you date people? How do you meet people? We were all running around with masks, and we couldn't go to restaurants, and, and one day we will be back and we can go out again, People are like, oh, that'd be so great again, right? And today, here we are, like go to a restaurant, just sit down, just look left and right and just watch people, and they still stare in their phone. They don't interact. It's such a waste. And 5 years ago, they would say, oh, if I ever get back to it, I will never do that again, right? Like
Right.
5 years later, boom, we're back, right? And it didn't even take 5, it was probably 3. And so I think it is something that you really have to tell yourself over and over again until it
Yeah.
becomes a habit. So you break a habit by forming a new habit, right? And that's it. And it depends on how determined are you, how passionate are you about what it is that you want to change. People say a lot, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. They don't. Do they really follow through? Right? There's a lot of bullshit around, because you
Yeah.
also have so many ways to get along with, to get away with a lot of things, right? And I think it's sad. It is sad to a certain degree.
Yeah. Yeah. And this like rolls perfectly into my next question. Most people associate success with comfort. Yet you say comfort is the fastest way to lose everything. Break that down for us.
The way I just described that situation in terms of sitting there and enjoying the moment, being present. And you mentioned, the moments that are magical after you had your near-death experience, right? All of a sudden, the things that we take for granted, sunshine, clouds, rain, I think that is where we begin we're looking for a challenge, right? Everything we do is we move forward. We're looking like, okay, what's next? What's next? And you see that with people when they have certain talent and things are almost flying towards them. They don't really tend to fight for it because they think, well, it's going to happen anyways. As a whole, we need to understand where we come from society-wise and where we're going. Nothing is granted. And the moment you take things as granted, which is that comfortable level, right? Like, hey, I'm good, doesn't mean that you're good tomorrow. And I think that is where we need to always have that bit of uncomfort that pushes us forward and keeps us driving and being hungry for not only money and success, but for everything, for wisdom, for joy, for love, for connections, for just be grateful for life.
When you climb a mountain, you're winning if you're comfortable 70% of the time, right? Like you're like, you know what? My pack's a little heavy, but I have an extra layer in case it gets cold. Or I am going to carry a little less water, so there's a chance that I might get thirsty at the end, but I'm only going to be comfortable for like an hour, and then we'll get to the end, and then I'll have water. Like you're constantly weighing these things so that your goal is to get to 70%, because it's impossible to be 100%, because 100% means the pack's too heavy.
Yeah.
So you're always negotiating what's going on for 70%. And I think so much of us, life is so comfortable that when it's not 100% comfortable, we're like, whoa. And we start throwing a little bit of a tizzy, which then destroys our joy.
Again, because certain things are maybe just too easy. And, if you look at other countries, for example, Vietnam, and I've been to Vietnam many, many times in my life. Then I didn't go for a long time, and I just recently went back last year. And you see what happens in these countries, where they're hungry to go and move forward. And the speed of development is mind blowing, right? And here, then I come to Germany, and the same construction site is there forever. I mean, that's like 5-6 years, and oh no, they had this and they had that, and blah blah blah. And I'm like, it's just because no one cares. No one cares. It's just pepper pushing left and right because we get the money, the government is there, blah 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 blah. But no, we're doing this because we want to move forward as society. We want to build something. We want to develop. We want to get better. And I think that's what we need as people. Is that drive,
Right. Definitely. You talk about a silent killer of success and why so many high performers unknowingly sabotage their homes and their relationships. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
I work with a lot of high level, high achievers, doers. And sometimes I am surprised how someone who runs a company with 1,000 people, and tell the 1,000 people what to do and how to do it. And, is a leader, respected leader in that, company or even industry. And then at home, he's like, and I got a 12-year-old daughter and I can't even tell her to clean up the room. Right. Like,
Right.
wow. What we tend to see is that when we turn our heads towards one goal and we chase, we forget about everything else around us. It deteriorates over time. And, people like, oh, my marriage, my relationship, my family is ruined because of ABC 1, 2, 3. And I say, no, it's not. It has really happened over time. And similar to what you said earlier, was the signs, right? That life is giving you signs. If you ignore them, it's like almost someone who says, I close my eyes and I become invisible. You don't. You really need to look the same way you look at your company, the same way you care about your company, your success, and whatever it is there. You really need to pay attention to what's happening in your life, in your personal life, to the people around you. And that's what's happening over time. So it's silent. It's almost like high blood pressure. You don't really feel it, but hey, it's one of the reasons why people die, right? There's a lot of people with too high blood pressure and they don't check it and they don't see it, and then boom, there they go. And I think that's the same thing that happens when you come home one day and everything is falling apart and you go, whoa, everything was great. What happened? It wasn't. You just ignored the sign.
Yeah. It's like the death of 1,000 paper cuts, right? Like paper cut's not going to hurt you, but if you have 1,000 of them in one spot, like you're going to be bleeding out. So definitely.
100%.
What's one of the biggest misconceptions people have about maintaining a strong relationship?
I think it really depends on the person. And I went through a few situations over the past few weeks with people. And I think what you really have to understand is that a relationship is not just one person, right? We said the relationship with yourself, and you will not be able to balance the relationship with your partner if you don't have it balanced with yourself. And many people try and fix the other person, right? It's like, I'm trying to fix my wife, my husband. You can't. It's just not possible. And then I say to people, when you change the way you look at yourself and when you change the way you look at others, all of a sudden everything around you will change. It's a very simple, you can sit in front of a painting and then you take your chair and you move it to the left. And then you pick up the chair and you turn it to the right, and you will see different perspectives. The same painting, all of a sudden has very different perspective, will tell you differently. People will look at you from the painting or not, right? And this is what I'm experiencing. And I work with someone who had his wife sick, and he's taking care of her, and he's going through so many emotions. I told him, I said, look, the most important thing you need to do now is, if you don't take care of yourself, if you don't pay attention to yourself, you're not going to be able to take care of your wife. So only the cup that overflows is able to share. That's a very simple saying.
Yeah. I do think that once you learn how to take care of yourself and just understand that perspective is so powerful in whatever you're doing, and it changes an experience, which then changes your energy and the way that you show up. When I was building, I mean, this is a crazy example, but we were out in a cold snowstorm on a mountain in Canada, and the wind was blowing, the snow was accumulating, and I had to keep shoveling out my igloo so that my tent was safe. And I was like, oh my God, I have to go out there again and shovel this igloo, and I hate the snow, and I'm so sick of this, and blah, 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 blah. And then I got in my, before I was finished with it, I'm like, you know what? When I was 5, this is a dream that I'm building a snow fort. I'm out in the snow. The earth keeps giving me more snow so I can build a bigger snow fort. And it's just so funny because my adult self is no, and my child self is I dreamed of these moments. And so I just had to reevaluate how I was approaching this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to pretend I'm a 5-year-old. and I'm going to pretend that like this is my dream come true and I've always wanted this, and like just go at it from that energy instead of the energy of like I have to. It's the energy of I get to, and then the way that that entire experience stays in your memory is entirely different. So whenever I'm having a hard moment, it's a cue to stop and say, okay, well, what's my perspective and what can I change to let my experience be different? Because I'm in control of my experience of whatever's happening.
You're already 3 steps ahead of most people in that context, right? Like, most people are stuck where they are. They don't understand that. So you really have to, and I always say coaching is not to tell, people exactly what, but more how to. I can't do it for you. You have to do it yourself, but I'm more than happy to explain it to you, right? Like you got to do it yourself. You got to take these 3 steps that you just explained there. And then people are like, huh. But if they don't have that aha moment, they don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah, they're on their Groundhog's Day, right?
Yeah.
Like that is replay, and
They're stuck.
Yeah, exactly.
They're stuck. It's like a hamster wheel.
Definitely. What's the most common pattern you see that leads to breakdowns in relationships?
It's interesting. I had this idea many years ago, and I say to people, when was the last time you really told your partner how much you love them and how much you appreciate what they do? And I'm not like, hey, honey, that pasta was awesome. I'm really like from the bottom of your heart. When did you pay a compliment, right? When did you tell them that? And that connection, that moment, that presence in that moment to explain to your partner or the person, it doesn't matter. It could be also a work relationship, right? But that's how you build that relationship. And again, that, everything we talked about today, from the comfort to ignoring the signs, that is where things fall apart. You have to form a habit, a lifestyle. You really have to do that. You have to go through life because life is energy. And whatever you share in terms of your energy is going to fire back. And believe it or not, right? But that's what's happening. It's physics.
Ooh, I like that. And here's the thing, like you need to generate your energy, right? Like you get to determine the state that you're going to show up in. And it's up to you to be like, okay, how do I get, when I go onto a stage to give a speech, like once you get rolling on the speech, right, you have the energy because you're feeling the crowd and all that kind of stuff. But you lose people in the first few minutes of the speech if you don't get them right away. Yeah. So behind the stage, like before they announce my name, like I'm doing jumping jacks. I'm doing I'm listening to pump up music. Like I am my own hype girl because I know that's the energy that I want to bring. Love it. And it will come naturally in a few minutes, but I got to bring it to start, right? And if we look at our lives and be like, okay, here's a meeting that I'm going into, or here's a conversation I want to have, or here's a relationship I want to fuel. Like you're the hype for whatever that is. And you need to bring it and then you'll get it back. You don't get it first. You have to give it first. Yeah.
But that is everything, everything we talked about is you can connect that too. It's like comfort, right? No, it's not going to happen. If you're comfortable, you say, oh, it's going to be okay. They're waiting for me. Everybody's here because of me, blah, blah, blah. No, you have to do it. I love it. It's the generator. Yeah.
Okay. So if somebody's struggling in their relationship today, what's like the first step you tell them to do to stop the bleeding or help things from going snowballing down the wrong way?
To look at themselves first. When you don't know where to go, the first thing you need to understand is where you are. You really have to first understand your status, like where are you? And then understand where do you want to go? Is it the train station? Is it the airport? Like, where do you want to go? Where do you want to go? Because most of these, when they struggle in a relationship, it's not necessarily the relationship, because what is the relationship? The relationship is 2 people or more people, right? But let's say in your marriage, it's 2 people. And when you are firm and you're okay and you're sound, then you can go to the other party and say, okay, hey, here, what's going on? But if you don't know, how do you expect your partner to give you what you don't even know what you need and what you want. Like, it's very difficult, and mind reading is super difficult.
I've tried it. I've not been successful at mind reading at all. No.
Keep on going and let me know if you ever find it
Yeah.
out.
I will. I'll share those secrets. I promise. No, and I think for me, like, even if I think of my relationships with my kids, right? And I'll get a message from school that somebody showed up to class late, or some, they can drive themselves to school now. And so part of that privilege is showing up on time. And so when they get this message that they've been tardy for the 1000th time, right?
Yeah.
And then I have a conversation with them, like, it always helps me to sit with them first and say, okay, listen, we have a problem, and that problem is over there, and you and I are here. So we need to figure out how we are going to solve that problem there and make sure that problem doesn't come between us. Because sometimes it's easier to have the problem come between us, right? But I have to remind myself, like, we are on the same team, and that problem is getting in the way, and it's going to push us apart if we don't solve it. And so with the kids, I always have to just separate it and start with, this is what, like, I guess kind of like you said, like, here's my intentions. I want you to get to class on time. If you cannot figure out how to do that on your own, you will lose your privilege to drive to school, and your mom will be dropping you off at the front door with the younger students. And I'm okay with that. If you're not okay with that, then here's another choice.
Here's the interesting part. In business, I agree. Most people that I work with and I talk to, they handle it like a champ, right? They're good at that. When they come home, they take too many things as granted. So they're super stressed from work, right? So now you get a message from school, which just adds more stress to your day. And then you come home, and the first thing you do is you yell at your kid. You're like, how's that even possible? Now you can drive. I gave the car. Like, what else? Right? No, not good. Not helping. So, instead of coming where you just came from, they come from a complete different angle. And that's just creating more stress. And then they're surprised that it creates even more stress. Right? What they want to do is decrease stress and try and, resolve the conflict, but they adding more and more and more.
And do you think that's because we're trained better to handle these things in work environments and not necessarily personal environments? Or do you feel it is an energy management thing overall, where I just gave my best work or the best of me from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And so I haven't had a chance to recharge my batteries. So things that wouldn't be a big deal all of a sudden are massive? Or is it a combination of both?
I think one problem we have is in work, we have a suit, we have that shining armor, and we put it on like Superman, a cape. And then we come home and we have to put that cape, we're just hanging it out the door, and we become vulnerable, and we don't know how to balance that. We got to be tough. We got to be, nobody really teaches us how to balance that, the emotions and manage that. It's just tough, but it's how we are raised. I think to a certain degree that has changed over the years, but for most people it hasn't, because they want to be perceived, right? And if that doesn't work at home, they get very upset and very angry, and that's just the wrong way.
When you start to notice the signs, right, of the relationship fracturing and starting to crack, what are the best ways to gain ground before that becomes a fracture all the way through?
Honesty. That's another mystery, is that, I have to be tough. I have to be this. I have to be that. You don't have to be anything. I think when you have a partner on your side and you're not allowed to be vulnerable, if you're not allowed to cry, if you're not allowed to show your emotions, if you're not allowed to be desperate and share your feelings, it's very difficult. So you have to be honest. You have to also approach it in a very neutral way. People have they come into discussions and they have that okay, this is how I see it, A and B, and how do we get from A to B? Boom, bum. And we talked about it earlier with your children, right? But that's a process. You have to have emotional intelligence in order to resolve that. It's like a little what is it called? Like a crossword puzzle. It's like you have to resolve that. And if you don't bring up that emotional intelligence, which you have to develop with your partner, then you're not going to be able to get there. You're not going to be able to have that safe spot, right? That's why I say you don't have a house, you have a home. A home is where you feel safe. One thing I say is like turn houses into homes again. There's a reason why every almost third kid in America grows up without the presence of a father. There is a reason why these relationships fail.
Yeah. And it's having that space to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Having that space to like let that emotion be what it is, so it gets the attention that it needs. So then it says, okay, you saw me, I feel heard, now I can sit back down again, right? And then like just connect with the people next to you. But if you're feeling these I know what it happens to me, right? I start getting vengeful, right? So I'm making dinner and I have kids watching television and I'm like hustling and hustling and hustling. And there's not one time that I say, come help me, or can you do this, or you turn that down, or whatever else like that. No, instead, I just like to whip my anger and get it a little bit more going, right? So that when the time someone's like, Mom, is dinner ready? I'm like, I blow, right? Like I totally blow because I've been denying my truth for the last 30 minutes and writing a narrative that makes them even bigger monsters than they are.
I'm glad that I'm not the only person that sees that happening in their home. So it's good. It's good that it's normal, but it is normal, right? It is normal. And you know what? You have to be silly. You have to be funny. You have to do things. You have to you can do it, right? You can do it.
Yeah.
And,
yeah.
We're very loud. My wife always says we're just a loud family, right? We're just loud, and that's okay. Other people are like, oh, guys, you're really loud. And I'm like, yeah, but we shout, we laugh, we do this, and I think that's part of the reasons why I'm still married, right? It's like 26 years now. So you just have to find your common ground, your home.
Yeah. And I think the habit that's helped me the most, and I'm interested to hear what your habit that's helped you, is just timeouts. Right? Like when you were a kid and you got to put in a timeout as a bad thing. I love a timeout. I do. I give myself a timeout. I'm like, Mom's taking a 5-minute timeout just to like pull away from this and reset. And if you think of basketball games or sports games, right? They use timeouts strategically to stop momentum from going in the wrong direction and to just disconnect for a second and reconnect in. And so for me, giving myself permission to have a timeout so that I can show up the way that I want to and have things go in the direction that I want to has been a huge game changer. What about for you in your own life and your own personal way of doing things?
I love running. Wherever I go, I try and run, which gives me, you're not on the phone, you don't read anything, you just go and run and think. The only thing sometimes I do is maybe listen to an audiobook. That's the max. But I tend to run with nothing. So that's one thing that helps. And another thing is if I have the time, I play golf. And I really play golf. And it's interesting to see that people, texting and emailing and why they do that. And then they miss hit and they do this. And I say, take that time for yourself, because that's really what you can do. It's almost like meditation, right?
Yeah.
So I do my morning runs if I can. I have my morning routine, and that all helps me to get focused, get in that moment, in that zone, to connect with myself.
Yeah. So everybody listening, think of what your thing is for you that allows you to unplug and do your magic so that you can show up the way that you want to. I love that.
You have to.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have one final question as we wrap up today. What's a piece of relationship wisdom you wish everyone knew, whether they're single, married, or somewhere in between?
We need to understand that relationships is the most important element in our life. And there's a study, a Harvard study, one of the longest studies ever conducted. So they tried to find out what defines happiness. And some people die during the study and whatnot. But long story short, the key to happiness is the relationships we have in our life. So you don't have to coming to our situation in terms of near-death experience, you don't have to get there. You just have to understand that that is the relationship with yourself, the relationship with the most significant people in your life is the most important thing, the most precious thing, and nothing is granted. Be grateful.
Oh, see, what a great way to end an episode is just to sit and realize our relationships are really a key component to the satisfaction and joy that we have in our lives.
Yeah.
And they should get the time and attention that they need so that we get to live the lifestyle we desire.
Yeah.
Wow. Tino, thank you so much for your time today. This has been so helpful. How do the audience members reach out to you or connect with you or learn more?
So the website is Dietrich Institute, and Dietrich is spelled Dietrich Institute.com,
Yep.
and then /Seek Summit. So
Okay.
DietrichInstitute.com/Seek Summit.
Perfect. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. Thank you.